It's Pride Month, and if your Facebook timeline looks anything like mine, it's filled with rainbows. Waco's own Pride festivities, which will take place in October instead of June, has evolved into a wonderfully diverse gathering of hundreds of LGBTQIA plus folks coming together to celebrate their authentic selves. But can you imagine what it must be like at a World Pride event? World Pride takes place each year at major cities across the globe in conjunction with that city's own Pride Parade. The first World Pride event took place in Rome in the year 2000, and since then it has happened in cities like Sydney, Jerusalem, London, Toronto, Copenhagen, and New York. This year, in fact this weekend, it's happening in Washington, D.C., in conjunction with the city's 50th anniversary of its own Pride parades. People from all over the world are drawn to the World Pride events to celebrate their history, connect with their community, and advocate for rights. If that sounds massive to you, then you have a sense of what it must have felt like for the people in this morning's text. It took place during the Feast of Weeks, a harvest festival that happened 50 days after the Passover, marking the end of the barley harvest and the beginning of the wheat harvest. Farmers brought their first fruits to the temple in Jerusalem, symbolizing their gratitude for God's bounty and provision. The feast also served as a reminder of the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, which took place 50 days after the Israelites left Egypt. So pilgrims from all over the countryside traveled to Jerusalem for the occasion, accompanied by music and song. Our text says this particular Feast of Weeks event was marked by devout Jews from every people under heaven. It goes on to name some of those people: Parthians, Medes, Elamites, and residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs. Since that's such a mouthful for the person reading the text, I decided to leave that part out. But still, you get the idea. It was a huge festival, a lot like today's World Pride events, with Jews gathering together from the farthest regions of the known world. Opening and closing ceremonies of World Pride events are marked by huge pyrotechnic fireworks displays. And in this morning's text, the Spirit put on her own visual and auditory production as she entered the crowd with the sound of a rushing wind. Think of it like a tornado, which is often compared to the sound of a freight train. And as if to provide lighting for the event, flames of fire appeared in the air, seeming to rest on the heads of those who were present. But Spirit's production wasn't done yet. She went even further by giving the apostles the ability to speak in many different languages that were being spoken by the people who had gathered. And our text tells us that some understood what was being said and were amazed. Others, on the other hand, tried to invalidate it by saying the apostles were drunk on new wine. And they were right. In the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, Jesus told a parable about what happens when you put new wine into old wineskins. He said you need to be careful because the new wine will burst the old wineskins due to the fermentation process. What everyone was witnessing that day was the new wine of the Spirit that couldn't be contained by the old wineskins of long-standing religious practices, legalistic thinking, and rigid traditions. And even though there were critics and naysayers in the crowd, people who couldn't relax their vice-like grips from the way things had always been done in the past, despite these critics, the text goes on to say there were about 3,000 people added to the new movement of Jesus followers. What we are experiencing today in the U.S. and around the world is the vice-like grip of people who are terrified of the Spirit's movement. That fear of anything other than the way things have always been done is responsible for executive orders that abduct and deport non-white residents. It insists on scrubbing away the identities that push against the margins of traditions, and the way it solves the challenge of language diversity is to insist that everyone speak a single language. All this is known as nationalism. And Christians who embrace this ideology, people who push this agenda in the name of their own God, these people are proponents of Christian nationalism. They are doing everything they can to protect themselves against the wild, rushing winds and purifying flames of the Spirit. But despite their best efforts, she won't be quenched. In Peter's sermon that immediately follows today's text, he referenced words spoken by the prophet Joel when he said, "In the days to come, it is God who speaks. I will pour out my Spirit upon all humankind. Your daughters and sons will prophesy, and your young people shall see visions, and your elders will dream dreams. Even on the most insignificant of my people, both women and men, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they shall prophesy." Friends, these are the days that Peter preached about. And when he had no idea of the reach of the Spirit's embrace and welcome. Later on, it took some convincing that it extended as far as to Gentiles. Today, people are afraid to let go of their tradition, their power, and their privilege. They can't imagine that the Spirit's embrace includes not only people within the binaries of male and female, but people who dance along the entire spectrum of gender. Transgender people, gender fluid people, intersex people. The Spirit welcomes to her table people of all sexual orientations: gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, and more. She continues to break down barriers, and in the process, she causes the same confusion and amazement of bystanders that we read about in this morning's text. She empowers and calls us all, regardless of society's expectations of us, even while affirming our diverse identities and experiences. Friends, these are the days. These are the days of which the prophet Joel prophesied, and the days which made their debut at a first century Feast of Weeks. These are the days in which the Spirit of God continues to fall on all people, no exceptions. Amen.